So, hello, this is Michelle Agner from mycareertopia.com. I'm here with career expert and author Kate White. She's former editor-in-chief of Cosmo Magazine. So, welcome, Kate. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Great to be here.
And I want to take a moment and just read a few excerpts from your bio. So I'll spend a moment here doing that. Kate White is a leading career expert and New York Times best-selling author of several influential books on work, leadership, and success, including, most recently, her fabulous book, I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, How to Ask for the Money, Snag the Promotion, and Build the Career You Deserve. Her advice is based on her extraordinary career running 5 major magazines. For 14 years, she was editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan, which was the best-selling monthly magazine on the newsstand for her entire tenure. In addition to writing nonfiction, Kate is the author of New York Times best-selling Bailey Weggins mystery series, 6 titles so far, including If Looks Could Kill, which shot to #1 on Amazon, and her books have been published in 20 languages, with her next thriller scheduled for release in 2014. Kate's the winner of the Matrix Award for Outstanding Achievement in Communication, as well as the Woodhull Institute Award for Ethical Leadership. She appears frequently on TV, including The Today Show, to talk about your most recent book, I Shouldn't Be Telling You This. I should likely admit that I didn't expect to like it because there's a lot of career advice out there that's not actionable, nor is it interesting to read. But your book was I found both very useful and very entertaining.
Oh, great. Well, I tried to make it anecdotal so that it would be not so academic. And one of the advantages I feel that I can bring as somebody who's writing about careers, which surprisingly isn't the case with some people writing about them, is that I've been in the trenches, both as an employee and a boss, and I think it gives me a certain vantage point, particularly because I was in that field of publishing for a long time. So you get a clarity when you look back that you don't have when you're in the thick of it, and you can see what you were doing right and what you were doing horribly wrong at times.
Right. It was very enjoyable and very actionable, and it was the stories that sucked me in. I'm always the content is nice, the guidance is nice, but when you connect, a story with it, that emotional connection is what draws me in and kept me reading. And I had intended to skim a lot of it, but I read the whole thing.
Oh, well, that's great. And I do think a lot of us are looking for information, for someone to tell us the truth as it is, and kind of have a roll up the sleeves, down and dirty approach. Because, look, when we're in the workforce, we're always wondering things like, I wonder how much she makes, or how much did she get for her raise compared to me? And there's no one ever willing to tell you some of this stuff, so that's why I thought I would.
Right. Yeah. No, it was fantastic. So I have a few questions. You recommend intersecting something that we love and something for which we have skills or could get skills, and then for something that has a continued need. And at Careertopia, we call that the career sweet spot, where you align your passion, your skills, and the market.
Right.
And you found your sweet spot in the magazine world. So was your path to it direct or indirect?
Well, it was pretty direct, though there was one little mishap in the beginning. And yet, I have to say, and I'll get to this, I think what's happening in the magazine business now is an interesting lesson about this whole notion of finding the sweet spot. I knew I wanted to be in magazines when I was young, and the only mistake I made is when I first got out of college, I had won Glamour Magazine's Top 10 College Girl contest, and they pretty much said, if you want to come work for the magazine, we'll try to find a space for you, which was great. And that was part of the reason why I worked so hard to win, because I thought it could be my ticket into working for Glamour. But I didn't have the gumption to say, I want to be in the editorial department writing. And I'd done a little promotion work in an election for a few months after graduation. So I said, well, I do promotion. And I ended up being stuck in the promotion department. And it took me a little way to wiggle myself out of there. But it was easy for me because I had the intersection of what I wanted to do and what I was passionate about worked beautifully with the flourishing magazine business. But today, magazines are under assault. Many magazines are hurting. They're hurting terribly at the newsstand as young women, Gen Y, get their information from a variety of other platforms. So it's an example of now being able to look at what's happening in a field and ask yourself, is this the right moment for me to go into it? And if I do go into it, should I put some sort of checks and balances in there to protect myself? And so when young women say to me today, I want to go into magazines, I tell them, that's fine, but think of yourself as a content provider who might also be able to work for a website or some other place.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's very important to ask yourself, is there a need for this? Is there going to be a need 5 years from now, from what you can tell doing your homework?
Right. And will the skill set that I'm using be transferable to a new platform, as you said?
Right. And there's no reason you can't jump in because the world is moving so fast. A lot of fields are changing. But you just have to be aware that while you're in one, you may need to be developing new skills to help you here's a perfect example. The editor of Lucky magazine was fired a couple of months ago in her early 40s and replaced by a 33-year-old who had a massive Twitter following. And what you could see is the new person who was hired had already sort of seen how the landscape was changing. 20 years ago, there was no social media. Editors didn't need to be savvy about that, but today they do. So you always want to be looking behind you, too. What are people doing who are coming in the door? What skills do they have? What skills do you need to be developing as the ground shifts in your field?
Great. Well, we've long been advised to have a 5-year plan. Everyone talks about have your 5-year plan, but I want to hear your take on that.
My take, Michelle, has shifted even, I think, since I wrote the book. In the book, I mentioned that I'm not a big believer anymore in 5-year plans because things are moving so fast. I think it's good to have a rough idea of, hey, I love being a content creator. I love writing. I love editing. I love researching. I love putting together information for consumers. And the idea might be then I'm not going to narrow it down too much. I'm going to stay light on my feet, and I'm going to stay open to opportunity. And so I would say even since I finished the book, which was over a year ago that it went to press, I realized the 5-year plan it's even stupider of an idea. I think loosely you want to have a sense of what you want, what you're good at, what the market is demanding, but really be incredibly nimble. It's just moving so fast out there.
That it is. Well, in the book, I really enjoyed the story that you refer to. Sometimes you have to be on the bus to Cairo to know what you want. And this reminded me of similar advice I heard from NPR's Robert Krulwich in a commencement speech he gave last year. And he talks about the metaphorical bus to Cairo, and he recommends noticing your reactions to work activities and responsibilities as you just start out in your career to help find that sweet spot and discover where you really should be career-wise. So
wait, he actually said he didn't say the phrase "bus to Cairo." Did he?
No, he did not say that.
I thought, wow, he's been on one too.
But it was more about focused on self-discovery and to find out what you're good at, what you enjoy, what creates stress for you, because all those are very personal and different for each person. So as you go through that discovery process in order to find out where the bus to Cairo is taking you, are there any questions you recommend asking yourself through that process?
Well, I actually think when you see it, you almost just have a eureka moment. And the reason I mention that story is because I was really shocked when I was doing a previous career book that almost everyone I interviewed for it, and Michelle, this did not dawn on me till after I had published this book, but as I thought back on it, I realized that everyone I'd interviewed for it had figured out what they wanted to do, not by thinking about it one day, but by bumping into it.
Mm.
And more than even than a question you'd ask yourself, I would say that what I came to see as really important is the idea of putting yourself out in the world and giving yourself a chance to bump into it. And this is true if you're not sure what you want to do at 22, or if at 35 you find yourself suddenly restless, or at 52 you are fired from a company you gave your all to.
Well, I have a few questions for you on the subject of communication. You talk about that throughout the book. And overall, even if someone's a great communicator, it seems from what I got out of your advice that they can always benefit from a bit of strategy in their interactions with others. Because many times people don't think about their communication style or how it's landing on others. But you recommend doing that, putting the thought into it and having a little strategy in it, especially with a boss.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and unfortunately in the workplace, we kind of rely when we're first starting out on our bosses to guide that, and they should. Your boss should be bringing you in when you first start and saying, hey, Michelle, here are my expectations for you, and your boss should be having regular catch-ups, and your boss should be listening to you and seeing what's going on. But you know what? That doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. So you have to probably do a lot of that from when you first start. You need to, the moment you start a job, say to your boss, if she hasn't done it already, can I sit down with you and just review your expectations? What marks do you want me to hit by the first week, by the first month, by the first 6 months? And then pay attention to your boss. Read between the lines with her. Notice the things that make her pissed off. You know, some bosses are just really prickly about things like being on time.
Right.
And a lot of times we talk ourselves into thinking, oh, maybe she's just seems aloof today because she's got a lot on her mind. But often bosses communicate with us indirectly because they don't know how to tell us, even grown-up, smart people. So if your boss seems aloof or a little preoccupied, and it isn't just for one day, realize it may have something to do with your performance. It may be up to you.
The things that we focus on at mycareertopia.com is individuals' communication styles. And there's a part in the book where you talk about the difference between men and women and how men sometimes have a hard time listening with a woman's communication style is to go on tangents and have lots of sensory and emotional details. And so in that case, you'd recommended speaking, in more of a manner that's appealing to your target with less detail and more focus. And so my question is, do you feel this is just a man-woman situation, or do you take that same consider your audience approach in many of your communications?
Oh, that's interesting that you say that. I love the way you've just phrased it, consider your audience. I was talking a little bit about the guy-girl thing in relation to your partnership after hours, but I think that's such a great point, Michelle. I really feel that you always should consider your audience, and sometimes it's a male-female thing, and it's not that we want to have to coddle him because he's a guy, but any other person, you can be aware of, this is a person that likes a lot of FaceTime. This is a person who likes a lot of words. This is a person who doesn't like a lot of words. Like, I had a male boss once, and I soon could tell after he came, his tolerance for conversation was pretty short, and he liked short answers. So instead of fighting that, I refocused how I did things with him compared to my previous boss. And I do think you take a look at how that person likes to communicate, their style, and just run with it. And also don't be offended. Some people can be kind of abrupt. There was a woman who was my PR director, and she was so abrupt. And I remember the first time I dealt with her, I'd been on a television show, and I said, well, what'd you think? And she was like, yeah, no, it's fine. I didn't like that white turtleneck you wore. But I got to love that style because it was so direct. But I didn't take it personally. I just thought that's the way she is.
Right. Once you understand that person and that's the lens they look through, then
right.
Yeah, you don't take it as personally. Whereas if there's someone who has an entirely different style who makes a similar comment, then you know, oh, I'm in trouble here. I better straighten this out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I do think it's good to get a sense of what people's different approaches are, and if they're the boss, work with that approach.
Right.
Tailor how you are to that approach.
Yep. Very, very valuable. Well, let's shift to the topic of career management and development. And you have advised that we think of our careers as a living, breathing thing that we have to care for and nurture. And
right.
I hadn't always separated career from job. So what do you advise between making that differentiation, and why?
Well, the reason I thought about it this way is really from all the years I spent as a boss. I became a boss of a department by the time I was in my early 30s, and I was the boss running a magazine from the time I was 38. And one of the things you begin to see over time is that there are people who are really good at their jobs, but they get so caught up in that they cease being the architects of their career. Mm-hmm. And they lose valuable ground because of it. They stay too long. They don't take on new challenges because they just love what they're doing.
Right.
And I saw a number of people lose out in their careers because of that. And there were a couple who I would try to hint to, and I was afraid if I spoke to them too directly about it, kind of we're changing hats from boss to mentor, they would become terrified that I was trying to urge them to leave.
Oh.
And it would affect their performance. But you need to manage your career and not just your job. You need to spend maybe 30 minutes every week just sort of asking yourself, how did it go this week? Is there anything I should be paying attention to on the job front? Are there new people coming in that have a skill that I don't have? Like there were women on my staff at Cosmo who they didn't do Twitter, they didn't do social media, and they were almost proud of it. Mm. And you wanted to say to them, get with the program, the world's changing. Or they didn't have savvy in terms of media and sort of being on television. And all people coming up as content providers now need to know how to do it on video. Mm-hmm. So ask yourself, do I have the skills? Should I be learning new skills? Are there promotions I should be going for? Do the math. At what point in the career of someone who does what I do, let's say you're in PR, at what point do people generally become a senior account manager? At what age do they become? And if you do the math and realize it's generally around 38, 39, 40, and I have no idea if it's probably 28, 29, 30. But you need to say to yourself, am I on track for that? And it's not a pressure thing. I think it's fun to manage our careers because maybe it's time to say, I need to be doing more of this, and always part of it is networking. We make the mistake of networking when we're looking for jobs, but we should be networking constantly.
Right. Yeah, that's what we cover quite a bit as well. And it's so easy, especially once you've reached a certain level of success, it's easy to sit back and not continue to develop and flex that muscle in the networking arena. But
yeah, and you get busy, so you think, I better stay at my desk and grab a sandwich and, work till 8. And instead of going to that cocktail party at 6, that would actually be a great place for you to go.
Right. Well, so you are in the middle of a transition from the magazine business to being a full-time author and speaker. And I would like to hear a little bit about how you made that happen and what is your strategy there.
Well, it's been the most delicious experience for me. And I began to realize back a ways in my career in the magazine business that I couldn't be all in as an author the way I wanted to. And as much as I love magazines, I could see my interest in them waning a bit, and I wanted to try something new. So what I did, and I would advise this to anyone who is thinking down the road they'd love to make a career switch, which I think is true of a lot of us today, is I started to lay the groundwork while I was still in the other job. I got book contracts, and it was, I'll admit, it was hard because I had this full-time job, and it was a big job. But I got up early, and I wrote, and I got my plan B going, and I tested the waters. And then I made sure to work with an accountant, lay it all out, so that I knew I could pull it off financially. And so when it came to set it all in motion, I was 100% prepared. And I think one of the mistakes sometimes we make is that we romanticize certain things, like, oh, I'd love to be a jewelry designer someday, or I'd love to start a website. You really need to go in and do the groundwork while you still have another job, and not only to make sure you can get it off the ground, but to make sure you really want to do it.
Yeah,
because it can sometimes look better.
Fantastic. My last question is regarding the recurring theme in your book. You talk a lot about going big or going home, and always you brought it up several times throughout the book about going big. So what is next for you in the going big department?
You know, that's such a good question, Michelle, because I think even though I'm the big proponent of that, it's easy for even me to not do it. And one of the things, even since I've written the book, I've told people, it's got to be a process. You can't just tell yourself, oh, I think big. I almost like to think you step back from everything you do and ask yourself the 4 B's. Could it be better, bolder, bigger, or more badass? And make that a process. And one of the things
Kate, I have really enjoyed talking with you today, and I would like to encourage our listeners to pick up a copy of your latest book, I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, How to Ask for the Money, Snag the Promotion, and Build the Career You Deserve. And they can go to your website to find out how to get it and to get a bunch of other resources. You have a number of great resources on there at katewhite.com.
great. Thanks for mentioning that.
I enjoyed the videos and the career guides, and especially your piece, How to Cure Low Job Libido. That was a Cosmo-esque title. That was
yeah. Well, thanks so much, Michelle. Love talking to you, and I wish you great success. With Careertopia, I think it's just a great concept.